is that I've been an investment banker for nearly 30 years. I was specializing in fixed income products, trading European and American government bonds and futures and options. I was actually working on the Danish Stock Exchange while I did my 2 degrees, my MBA and my master's in law. I was studying in the evening and working on the stock exchange, trading government bonds and mortgage bonds. And then in '93, I moved to London to work for Credit Suisse First Boston. In 2011, I was working for Morgan Stanley, and that's where I stopped working. I realized I was probably blacklisted after a dinner with Janet Yellen at the Lanesborough Hotel in London. I did not realize that the Federal Reserve was privately owned. I thought she was a public sector worker, and I just couldn't understand why these international institutions, IMF, Federal Reserve, the World Bank, World Economic Forum, what are these institutions doing? They seem to be doing more harm than good. And I was kind of grilling her and asking her a lot of questions. We were about 20 people. There were Janet Yellen and 1 or 2 colleagues from the Federal Reserve. There were some economists and professors from London School of Economics, and then there were a group of traders from the large American investment banks. And I was really asking her a lot of tough questions. Even though I'd made my annual budget already in April, they fired me. And it was very weird because a month before, they offered me to be promoted and move to New York and so on. Which I turned down because my family was living in Denmark and I was commuting in the weekends, so I didn't want to do that. All of a sudden, it was very difficult to find a job, so I started studying a lot and reading. And it was like under every stone I looked under, there was another dead body. It was like everything was wrong. I mean, it was like the educational system, which I'm interested in because I have 3 kids, and it was the pharmaceutical industry. They're being fined billions and billions for cheating with different studies and lying and thieving, and it was the looting of the third world, and everything. It was just everything, and I was just in 2015. That was when I learned how money is created, and I just could not believe it. I thought, like everybody else, that money was something that our national banks were creating, and that it's privately owned, privately controlled, and that was a huge shock for me in 2015. You could just see a pattern when every single country that came into some sort of difficulty, and then IMF and World Bank ride in as the knights in shining armor to help them, and every single time it turns out that they get worse off, and all their assets are stripped and end up on the hands of globalists and foreigners. And maybe even you might even throw in a US Army military base on top of it. And if that happens once, maybe it could be a coincidence when, like Joseph says, when it happens 160 times, then it cannot be a coincidence. So that's one of the incidences. The other one is if I invested according to, if I believe that these central banks would act in a way that would benefit their society, then I would make money. But if I invested in a pattern where if I wanted to create as many big booms as possible or big economic recessions as possible, then I would make more money. So my job was to invest in government bonds, and a bond would have a maturity from 0 years up to 30 years. The shorter maturities, 0 to 2 years maturities, are very much dependent on short-term operations of the central bank. So the central banks decide the interest rates in the short end, the overnight rate that the other banks would pay. And the theory is that if the central bank hikes rates, it makes it more expensive to borrow money, and then an overheated economy will slow down. On the other, and vice versa, the theory is if if the economy is dragging its heels and there's too much unemployment and you need to help the economy reignite, then the theory is then they should cut interest rates. So to make it cheaper to borrow money. And this is the official story. If you invested after they would be cutting rates, then they wouldn't, and vice versa. When they really needed to hike rates because the whole economy was booming, then they were dragging the heels. They would not hike rates. So they always did the opposite of what you as a trader would have done if you were the central bank governor. So very soon we learned that it was not about investing for what would be best for the country. It was about investing for what would a central bank governor do if his job was to create as big booms as possible, followed by as big recessions as possible. If you invested that way, then you would make a lot of money. And I think that is the opposite of what they're telling you. They're saying that they want to have a stable inflation and stable growth rates. That's the story they tell you, but they're actually doing exactly the opposite. Because my job was not to lose money, my job was to make money for my employer. And therefore I would say, okay, so here's what I would do if I was the central bank governor and I wanted to benefit the people. On the other hand, I'm now working for an investment bank and I need to make profits. So I'm going to presume that the central bank governor's job is not to help the nation they work for, but that job is to create big booms followed by big busts. And that way invest according to that, and that would be more profitable. I can only guess, but clearly there's money in insider trading. When you have good connections, you can make money. And if you know what's going on in the financial markets, you can create a lot of profits for yourself. I think I would like to combine this very particular, area of short-term interest rates trading to what's going on when countries in the third world are in economic dire straits and in economic trouble, and you have the IMF and the World Bank coming in officially to help these countries. And every single time, 160 different countries, they have looted systematically by saying they're helping them, but they're coming in and they're lending them a lot of money, but on two terms. One of them is interest rates are very high, which you can only pay back by hiking taxes or selling your national resources. But then what they do is they put in some terms. One of them is you need to devalue your currency. But first you borrow the money in foreign currency, and then you devalue your currency, so you have to pay back even more money because your currency is now worth a lot less. And then they demand that you cut back on public expenditure. So then the government would have to fire their employees, and that gives less tax revenues. And then you have the stock market crashing because nobody is buying anything from the local companies because they have no money. And then they have to fire the people. So now people are being fired in the public sector thanks to the IMF and the World Bank, and as an indirect cause of that, people are being fired in the private sector as well. And now you have the perfect storm for the globalists, or as Catherine Austin Fitts says, the Mr. Global. And that is that the stock market is now down, asset prices are down, house prices are down, real estate, everything is down. And then you come in and it's normally at a time when they need to reschedule another tranche of the IMF loan, and then they can come in and say, okay, now we would like to buy your natural resources, your water in Bolivia, for example, or your oil, or we would like to be allowed to put up a military base. If you're one of the former Soviet republics, for example, then America would like to have a base all the way around Russia, of course. So 160 times IMF and World Bank have not helped the local country. 160 times they have looted 160 different countries. So it is not a coincidence when you do something 160 times, then it is by design. In order to be able to loot all these 160 countries, and again, I don't know what's going on inside the heads of these globalists, but it is clearly that what they have done is they create as big difference as possible between the poor and the rich, and they try to decimate and minimize the middle class. And one way to get away with 160 times looting the poorest countries in the world, obviously, then it's a good idea to convince people that they are poor and it's their fault, and that the world is running out of oil, it's running out of water, it's running out of natural resources, and that is the reason. So there's that, as if there is a natural reason why they are poor in South America and Africa and Far East Asia, when actually it's the other way around. It's by design. They have destroyed the nature. They are chopping down the forests. They are intentionally, I believe, polluting the oceans. They are destroying the earth, really. So in order to get away with it, they want to create a mental picture of the world being very poor and running out of resources, and it's actually the other way around. The world is abundant. And one example of that was Gaddafi's Libya. When he took over Libya, it was the poorest country in the world. And since it was an Italian colony, he was allowed to be in control of the money creation. So the Italian colonies, the Italian central bank did not have it as a demand for their independence that the central bank should stay under the Bank of Italy. Whereas, for example, if you take the former colonies of France and England, they had their so-called independence, but only if they signed up to the contract that Bank of England and Bank of France still were in charge of their money creation. And this is how that France and England have been able to control their former colonies economically by making sure that their monetary base is so tiny, so small, that it is almost impossible to have any economic growth in their countries, even though they are abundantly rich on natural resources and a young labor force that is willing to learn and work and so on. So this is all by design, but because of Libya being an Italian colony, they, so to speak, got through the net, and he created money to the benefit of the people. And it was so wealthy that when the West, including my country, Denmark, unfortunately, carpet bombed that country and destroyed this country, he had saved 125 tons of gold and a similar amount in silver and about $500 billion. That's a lot of money for a nation with less than 6 million people. So he had made his country very rich. It was a very well functioning country, and that was destroyed in the name of saving the population from this evil dictator who allegedly was killing his own population. If you claim to save the Libyan people from an evil dictator, then why would you fly 1,000 to 2,000 kilometers into the desert and bomb the great man-made river? So Gaddafi had spent $64 billion on retracting water from beneath the Sahara Desert, and then through this elaborate man-made river system, send it up to Tripoli and Benghazi by the Mediterranean to give them hundreds of thousands of years old clean water, drinking water. Why would you fly in with Danish and American airplanes and carpet bomb that with uranium depleted bullets, destroying them, even destroying the factory that created spare parts for this man-made river? Why would you do that? So you only do that if you want to destroy the countries that are well functioning. So the people in power right now, there's evidence to say that if they are not evil themselves, then they are doing evil deeds. Not once, not twice, but 160 times. So it's not a coincidence. I know, I mean, we have the Danish television spinning every single time. Whenever America says, let's go out and bomb some nations, we fly out and we carpet bomb any nation they want. But so far, whenever we've done that, always afterwards, they always admit, oh, that was a mistake. And people can't remember this. It's just, after a few years, they forgot it was another mistake, and then there's another dictator. Allegedly, they need to go out and bomb, and it's always a mistake. We need to reveal these facts, and I think they should be stripped of any kind of power, these institutions, and there should be a democratic oversight, and the perpetrators should be put in front of a court. And if it can be proven that they did it intentionally, they should have some sort of punishment for it, I think. If you increase the money supply or increase the velocity of that money, you use it more often, that will create either growth or inflation or a combination of those two. And vice versa, if you minimize the monetary base or you put in certain restrictions on the velocity of the money, then it either will diminish the monetary base, and that will then either contract the economy, create a recession, or deflation, i.e. falling prices. So that could either be falling prices on your salary, or it could be on real estate prices or equity prices, or all assets prices. Yeah. So this is it. So if the monetary base goes up, growth goes up. If the monetary base goes up more than there are free resources in the society, then growth will go up, but also inflation will go up. And if you make it very, very easy for money to go around, then most likely growth will go up because you're probably buying services from each other. But it could also make inflation go up because people would like to hire more people to make more money. So this is a formula that really works, and it doesn't matter whether in the current system it has been usurped and is controlled by literally a few hundred families in the world, or whether we take the power to create money back and make sure that it is each independent nation, sovereign nation, that issues its own currency. No matter whether this is a bunch of banksters and mafia and globalists who make this money, or whether it's honest, hardworking people in a democratic society that gets the benefit of the money creation. This formula always holds. Yeah. So more money in the society will give you more growth. If you have too much money, it will give you growth and inflation. So the ideal balance is to find out how much money can we create, how big a monetary base can we allow in our society, and we can allow as big a monetary base as your country is willing to work. I mean, the people in your country, are they willing to work hard? Do you have a lot of natural resources? Do you have an army to be able to protect those resources? Because it could be stolen if you are invaded and your currency is without any value all of a sudden. If you take all that into account, that is the optimum monetary base. If you make it too big, then you will have some inflation. The money created right now, it goes into investments and into banks portfolios, this much, and then maybe this much goes into the real economy. And this ties very well into the fact that IMF, World Bank, World Economic Forum, Federal Reserve, all the central banks, Bank of International Settlement, they go into all these 160 countries. They rob them from their national resources. They create big difference between rich and poor. And this is the same they do. If you create money only through the banking system. Then you are allowing the banks to decide who will be rich and poor, who are allowed to borrow a few $1 billion to buy Trump Tower, for example, who will be allowed to make the new Starbucks chain, who will have a deal to start an Amazon or an Facebook and so on. So so when you allow the banks to control the entire money creation, they're also in a position that they can put their preferred individuals in positions of power. They're creating an economic system that is creating as big a discrepancy between rich and poor as physically possible. And this is where it's very tempting to go in and quote Catherine Austin Fitts and say that this COVID situation is really, it's a health crisis, but really it's a monetary event, because it's clearly a false flag operation. You know, it's a flu. I mean, it's less deadly than the flu. And then you have the whole media coming out with a lot of lies upon lies, and a lot of people prefer to believe the government for whatever reasons I can't understand, but they do. What we can see over the last year is the middle class being decimated, and the multinational corporations, Mr. Global, all the big corporations, they are gathering even more wealth, probably doubling up their wealth than they had before the corona. So this is kind of very interesting. So you can destroy the world economy, and you can send all the public sectors home from work. You can destroy a lot of small businesses, and the top 200 businesses and richest globalists can double their fortune. That's very interesting. And I claim, just like when you've done it for 160 countries before, I will claim that this is by design. But the money creation right now is basically designed so that you think that you are worthless, that you are nothing, and there's some of these semi-gods. So the Bezoses and the Zuckerbergs, they are at least alleged semi-gods, and then somehow they miraculously made all these billions in a fair way, and it's all a pack of lies. It's by design, and it's highway robbery. That's what's going on. So what we've had been seen over the last year is we had this bizarre situation that you send home all the public sector. In my country, in Denmark, with full pay, you destroy the middle class, and they don't get, in most countries, don't get reimbursed by the government for that, or maybe have a few handouts here and there, but they're destroyed. And normally, when you do that, then monetary base would go down. You would have a recession, you would have unemployment going up, you would have house prices collapsing. And what we've seen is the opposite. We've seen equity markets reaching new highs. We've seen real estate prices making new highs. It makes no sense whatsoever. Well, it does, because the governments have decided that they want to, and I would like to speculate why they've done it, but we can see factually that they have decided to increase the monetary base a lot, and basically by making handouts to the public sector workers and some welfare checks and a lot of money through the banks and the central banks buying up different bonds, corporate bonds, even equity markets outright. And that way they have sent a lot of money into the society, and that can either create growth or inflation. And since a lot of people are literally not allowed to work, so it's difficult to produce growth. So the money will go into inflation. But since you have a lot of unemployed workers, the salaries are not going up. So that money has gone into equity markets and into real estate. And that's the reason why this has happened. And I think that it's very important to as an example of understanding money creation. And I think we have a beautiful chance now for everybody to be able to understand that this money creation, the story we've heard about, that is this finite amount of money that we all have to fight over. and it cannot be increased. And this is the official story. It's all BS. And we saw that in 2008 in the financial crisis when they bailed out the banks, not the people, but they bailed out the banks to the tune of 1,500 billion euros in Europe and probably twice as much in America. But and all that money went to the banks. So the banks bailed out themselves, and then gradually the economy started moving again. And we see it now during the COVID-19 monetary event, false flag operation, plandemic, epidemic, which is not an epidemic because whatever. But we see it now that the monetary base has been increased so much that even though people are not working, the equity markets are still going up and the house prices are still going up. I mean, if people are not working, it's counterintuitive. How can the house prices go up when people are unemployed? How are they going to pay for it? It's impossible, right? But they still go up because there's so much money. It has to go somewhere. And you have negative interest rate in the bank, so they go out and buy real estate. And one of the reasons they buy real estate is because they're expecting, when you increase this monetary base a lot, they're expecting that there will be inflationary pressure, and then you want to have real assets such as gold, silver, and maybe you can argue for cryptocurrencies as well, because there's a finite amount of that. And then, of course, real estate. So that's what's going on. And what I would like to see is two things. First of all, I want people to understand that it's a scam. And we have been scammed by some con artists. And the con artists are the globalists and the banksters. Mr. Global is more polite to say. But they have usurped the right and the privilege to create money from the world's population. And they are not using it to the benefit of mankind, they're using it to the benefit of themselves. And even they are using a lot of that money to pay for spin doctors and lying mainstream media and lying professors on various universities to convince the ordinary citizen that it's their fault they're poor and that these central banks are working in their interest, and it's all a pack of lies. They're not. So I'd like to see that the people understand how money is created and demand to take it back to themselves, and that could be done either centrally or decentralized. But the most important thing is that the money creation that you have should benefit everybody.